hi-fi stereo stuff, it's all old and not very good equipment, at least 15 years old, nothing too impressive. You know, there have been some interest in some of the pictures of Saddam Hussein, maybe a plate or a cup, things like that. But a lot of stuff is broken, like the chandeliers, and a lot of the furniture is pretty much in ruins. And these guys really can't take home a couch or a chair with them, even if it was intact. They just don't have the room.
But very quickly, I guess that you and the other guys are sleeping on those sofas and chairs. That would be my guess.
We did the first night. We actually spent the night inside, and it was, you know, nice to be sleeping under a roof for the first time in a couple of weeks. Once you got beyond the weirdness of being in Saddam Hussein's old house, it was pretty much a normal night's rest. Some couches have found their way outside of the palace, and some of the troops are using them to catch some Z's. For us, though, we spent last night out here on the lawn, Saddam Hussein's former front lawn, because it's getting actually awfully hot in there. There's no electricity, and at night it's actually cooler outdoors than it is inside.
Just extraordinary that we're looking at the inside of Saddam Hussein's former palaces. Now they belong to the coalition. Really extraordinary. Greg Kelly with the 3rd ID of the U.S. Army. As always, we really appreciate seeing you on the air here, and we'll talk to you a bit later outside the palace. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Lori.
Now let's go to Brian in Washington.
All right, thank you much, Lori. We want to talk to our military analysts who are here to give us the view of what's going on. We have with us Bill Cowan, who is a retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel, and Van Hipp, a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army. Gentlemen, welcome. It's kind of interesting that we have a guy from the Marines and a guy from the Army, because that's really what we have in Baghdad right now. If you look at the map of Baghdad, you can run kind of a line along the Tigris River. And on the west side, the left side, you got the Army starting to take over, and on the right side of the city you have the Marines that are walking through neighborhoods and beginning to take control of that side of the city. How far are we from having real control of Baghdad? We got loosely surrounded, but don't really have much control within most of the city. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely, Brian. It looks to me like we're going to go ahead and try and secure that eastern side. We know the eastern side to the east of the Tigris River is principally Shiite. That's where the Marines are operating. Clearly, they're still engaged in combat over there and may be for some time. But over on the west side of the city, which is Sunni Ba'ath Party, the real loyalists to Saddam, that's where the long-term engagements may be. The Marines may have a little bit. It's going to be a tough job, but a little bit less of a job to do as long as they're on that side. If they have to cross over and join up with the Army, with Van's people, then it's going to be maybe the tough fighting.
Bill's exactly right, and of course you've got the special forces operating on both sides of the river.
Yes.
But if you look at that eastern bank of the Tigris, no question, heavy Shiite populations. In some of the areas like Saddam City and particularly New Baghdad, upwards of 85–90% of the population is Shiite, and those are the people who, of course, over the years have distrusted Saddam the most. I do think the biggest problem, one of the biggest problems that we've got right now, and we're seeing this as we have the probing missions and we encounter various pockets of resistance, is this. You've got these imported terrorists from Jordan, Egypt, and Sudan who are there in the city that we have had to encounter. So that's something that we're going to have to deal with, both the 3rd ID, the Marines, and the Special Forces in the city.
And how is this loose cordon that they keep talking about, that this technique that they're implying called loose cordon, how does it seem to be going thus far?
Well, probably good, Brian. We do want to let people out of the city. We're probably happy to see civilians fleeing, and they're not crossing the border into other countries. It appears they're going outside the city to find other places of refuge, maybe villages, families, friends, whatever outside. That's good. The less civilians that are inside the city, the better it is for us if indeed we have to engage. By the same token, that cordon is not going to let armed units of the Republican Guard, Special Republican Guard, or anybody else get outside that city. We like it when those guys come and engage us.
Absolutely. Keep that leadership contained in the city. Don't let them flee to the north. And also, don't let folks from the north who may want to come into the city to beef up what's left of the Republican Guard and some of the Fedayeen get in there. And that's why we've got elements of the 101st and of the 82nd deployed north of the city to prevent some of the remaining elements of the Nebuchadnezzar division, which is at Tikrit right now, from coming into the city.
I also want to ask you about this is usually usually the time of day where if we're going to see activity in downtown Baghdad, we see it. It was yesterday we saw the tanks trying to cross the bridge, A-10s in the air. There are all kinds of activity going on in the city. And today, it seems that there's a kind of lull. What do you make of that?
A little quiet, you're right, Brian. Maybe we're taking a little chance to get a breather here, replenish our supplies once again, give these guys, they've been fighting hard, both the Marines and the 3rd Infantry Division, fighting pretty hard. Give them a little bit of a break. At the same time, allow this psychological warfare effort to continue. Let the word get out in and among the civilian population that despite what the information minister is saying, it looks like the Americans are really here. I haven't seen them, but my neighbor did because he was just down at Saddam's palace. Let that word get out.
Yeah, and there may be some things going on behind the scenes that we don't know about.
A lot of things going on behind the scenes.
Do we have any sense of what's going on?
Particularly with our special forces on the ground in Baghdad, rest assured, identifying more targets and so forth. And also, I wouldn't be surprised to see the 4th ID right now getting ready to be deployed to the north of Baghdad, getting ready to go to Tikrit. I think, we have changed from what I would say a military phase that is a conventional type of warfare into what we've been talking about as a checkpoint type of warfare with this loose cordon. But don't be surprised to see the 4th ID deployed to the north and getting ready to go to Tikrit to take out the remaining part of that Nebuchadnezzar division.
All be revealed in due time, I am sure. Gentlemen, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Meanwhile, the search continues for 2 U.S. airmen whose F-15 fighter jet crashed near the city of Tikrit on Monday. Fox News correspondent David Lee Miller joins us live from U.S. Central Command headquarters in Doha, Qatar. Hello, David Lee.
Good morning, Brian. CENTCOM is not releasing a great deal of new information about what happened. They're still looking, as you said, for those 2 airmen that were aboard the F-15E strike aircraft. It is believed that that plane that was downed may very well have gone down somewhere behind enemy lines in an area that is in fact controlled by the regime. As for the men, we can only tell you that they are from the Seymour Johnson Air Base in North Carolina. As for the cause of this incident, that is also under investigation. We do not know at this hour whether this was enemy fire or a mechanical problem. This incident, by the way, happened on Sunday, but CENTCOM is only releasing the details now. Of course, they did not want to release it any earlier, anything that might endanger the 2 men who are still being sought. Now, we are getting word this morning of a successful search and rescue that took place on Monday, about 48 hours ago. This just south of Baghdad. Apparently, 2 Special Operations Forces soldiers were critically wounded. A search and rescue team was sent out, and the men were airlifted safely. They are now in a hospital in Kuwait. They were, as I said, critically wounded, but because of this very successful airlift, CENTCOM says they stand now a 95% chance of survival. And time again here at CENTCOM, we have heard, Brian, that this is a conflict not about one man, but about a regime change. But nevertheless, the world anxiously awaits word on the fate of Saddam Hussein. And again, this morning, CENTCOM officials are only saying that they had very good intelligence when they launched that airstrike a little more than 24 hours ago in the Mansour district, but there is no confirmation one way or the other as to whether or not Saddam Hussein survived. There are some interesting reports, though, coming out of London. A number of different newspapers there have talked with anonymous sources, they say, associated with the military intelligence there. One of the papers, the Daily Telegraph, quotes an unnamed intelligence officer as saying, and I quote again, "We just missed him." Another paper, The Guardian, says, and I quote again, "He was probably not in the building at the time it was bombed." And the London Times is also saying now that it is believed before the bombing took place, Saddam left that building, possibly, they say, by using an underground tunnel. And finally now, a story that's getting a great deal of attention here in Doha, Qatar, is the death of an Al Jazeera correspondent, Tariq Ayoub. The Al Jazeera network is based here in Qatar, and yesterday evening there was a news conference here. In attendance was the satellite channel's chairman, Sheikh Hamid bin Thamar Al Thani. He said there was no provocation for the attack, but he also added it is not possible at this time to determine whether this airstrike was deliberate. Yesterday, I don't know if you heard it, but CENTCOM said that The reason the Al Jazeera studios and facilities were struck in Baghdad is because there was enemy fire coming from that building, and the coalition was only exercising its inherent right of self-defense. Nevertheless, this remains a very contentious point here for the Al Jazeera network, and I expect that we may hear more about this later today during the daily news briefing. For now, that's the latest from Doha. Back to you.
And I must add a point of personal loss for you, David Lee Miller, because I know you knew the journalist who was killed the other day, and our sympathies to you and to the colleagues and the friends and the family of the colleagues that was lost. Let's go back to Lori Dew in New York. Thank you, David Lee.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit more with Colonel Dick Esau, who is U.S. Marine Corps retired. He joins me here on the set. 28 years in the Marine Corps. You were also the former commanding officer of the 3rd Marine Regiment, so we wanted to point that out. And we want to let our viewers know that we are awaiting a news conference with British Foreign Secretary Jack Straw and the French Foreign Affairs Minister. We'll get to that in just a couple of minutes. But first to you. We are hearing from our embedded reporters Greg Kelly and Rick Leventhal that there are still pockets of resistance there in Baghdad. What about the possibility of letting enemy soldiers who we have captured deal with those pockets of resistance?
Yeah, it's funny you should ask that, because today I was thinking about what we would do with the expatriate Iraqis, the ones who came to the United States and have lived there for a period of time and are now back in country. Why couldn't they, be the leaders of these people who really don't want to live under Saddam Hussein or anything to do with Saddam Hussein, and let them lead these people against these pockets of resistance? Let them clear out their own country instead of putting our people, out there on the street.
Colonel, this news conference is happening. Let's stand by. Let's go now to Paris, where British Foreign Secretary Jack Straw is speaking. Let's listen.
Indeed, for your hospitality here this morning. And we've had, as you've already indicated, a great agenda for our discussions. I was able to brief the Minister about the outcome of the discussions which took place on Monday and Tuesday at Hillsborough Castle in Northern Ireland between President Bush and Prime Minister Blair, US Secretary of State Powell and myself on the issue of Iraq, the Middle East and Northern Ireland. You will be familiar with the statements that were made at the end of those discussions, so I won't repeat them at length, except to draw your attention to the fact that both the Prime Minister and President Bush committed themselves to a, quote, vital role for the United Nations in the reconstruction of Iraq and other matters relating to Iraq as well. We all hope desperately that the conflict comes to an end. It looks as though we may be towards the close of hostilities. None of us want the blood of a single individual shed at all in this situation. We want the conflict to come to an end. We want the removal of Saddam Hussein's government, and we want, as this is happening, to begin the process of rehabilitation, redevelopment and reconstruction of Iraq, and the encouragement of a representative and then a democratic system of government inside Iraq. Again, what was emphatic yesterday at Hillsborough was that the government of Iraq, of the people of Iraq, has to be from the people of Iraq and by the people of Iraq, of course with the support of the coalition and with the support of the United Nations and the international community. On the Middle East, good progress was made yesterday. Dominique was saying to me upstairs, and I agree with him, that the thing that has caused the greatest degree of anger in the Arab and Islamic world has not actually been Iraq, but it's been this profound sense of injustice felt by the Palestinians, and the vicious circle as the huge insecurity from terrorism felt in Israel by the Israelis then develops a vicious circle in which the sense of injustice gets worse and worse. And if there is a single issue in the world in which, for the stability of the world as well as the future of those people we have to deal with, it is on the Middle East. And France and we have worked very collaboratively together, and I would like to commend Dominique and his president for all their work to getting the peace process going and the very constructive role which France has played inside the quartet. Yesterday, President Bush repeated what he'd said at Camp David, that he was going to publish the roadmap, once Abu Mazen's cabinet was in place, and was then fully committed to its implementation. And significantly, yesterday, President Bush also said that he was going to devote the same energy to the Middle East peace process as Prime Minister Blair has devoted to the Northern Ireland peace process. Well, I have to say, from an entirely impartial stand, that the energy that Prime Minister Blair has devoted to the Northern Ireland process has been huge, and it's an energy which is now producing dividends, so we look forward to its conclusion. As we also, yesterday at Hillsborough, discussed the Northern Ireland process, it's in a sense something which is internal inside the British Isles, the United Kingdom, and for the Republic of Ireland, but it has huge resonance across the world. And a point that President Bush made was that if the parties can now move from a peace process to a peace outcome in Northern Ireland, that will send a really important message to other theatres of conflict where people have tried to resolve their arguments by killing each other, to show them that it's possible to resolve them by peaceful, dialectical, democratic process. As Dominic says, we discussed many other issues this morning, including India and Pakistan, where again we have worked very collaboratively, and we look forward to the discussions in the G8. Africa, and I commended the role which the Minister himself has played in respect of the early resolution of the terrible Côte d'Ivoire crisis, and we have seen it as our role to give every support to France in the region and in the United Nations. And we got on to European matters as well. Thank you very much. Very happy to take questions.
Comme nous avons assez peu de temps, il n'y aura pas, sauf demander express, de traduction simultanée, faute de quoi les questions seraient réglées à portion congrue.
Ma question s'adresse à M. Stroh. Monsieur le ministre, la France, l'Allemagne, la Russie et d'autres évoquent un rôle central pour l'ONU. Vous avez évoqué hier à Belfast un rôle vital pour l'ONU. Quelle différence entre le rôle central et le rôle vital?
What will it be?
It's a very good question. I think it's more or less the same. La même chose.
Minister Randa Takieddine Al-Hayat. Minister, I follow up on the question of my colleague. Would the vital role of the UN imply a commitment by the Americans to withdraw from Iraq as soon as the war has finished? Would that mean that the UN would take over the administration of post-Saddam Iraq? This is the French position as far as we know. What is your position and what is President Bush's position?
Well, let me just say that because I should have said it in my opening remarks, that we were very grateful for the welcome given by the French government for the conclusions from Hillsborough. Both we and the United States obviously wish to see as quickly as possible the creation of a representative democratic Iraqi government carrying the consent of its people, responsible crucially for its own security. That can't happen overnight, and in those circumstances, since the United States, United Kingdom forces are the reality on the ground in terms of providing security and stability over time, we have to remain there. It is our responsibility to stay there until these other processes are through. But do we want to see it as quickly as possible? Representative democratic government responsible for its own security? Of course. As the Prime Minister and the President have said, this is not a military action for conquest, it's a military action for liberation.
Christophe Nessefer du Handelsblatt, l'Allemagne. Monsieur Dupin, je suis là. Bonjour. Est-ce que le fait d'avoir un administrateur américain en Irak, l'après-guerre, serait une contradiction à ce que revendique la France d'un rôle central pour l'ONU.
To have a central role for the UN.
Mr. Straw, does Britain wish to be represented at the summit on the 29th of April?
Je crois qu'il faut partir de la situation telle que nous la connaissons.
I believe we have to go from the situation now, from the war, with its consequences. Each can see that this war can be over. We will then talk about security. We will ensure that security and integrity is maintained on the whole territory. It will be a difficult period. We said it, the force present on the ground are there. Then there will be the phase of reconstruction. As you said, in this phase it is important that legitimacy of the national court is maintained and supported by the UN. Then you say, what's the vital role central of the UN? I believe that the UN should occupy the whole place. The thickness of the community and all processes will be successful. There will be a pragmatic approach, and we wish that everyone will bring its force to the success. There is a great chance that Iraq will bring all the international community for this success in order to guarantee the success.
About the meeting on the April 29th, maybe they're not there.
I'm sorry, I forgot the first part of your question.
Two questions. What was the first part?
What was?
Okay, fine.
A question from this gentleman.
Le ministère des Affaires étrangères a-t-il été informé des obsèques d'Ibrahim Zakeri, numéro 2 du mouvement des Moudjahidines du peuple?
Obsèques qui se sont tenues au cimetière du Père-Lachaise à Paris le vendredi 4 avril devant plusieurs centaines de militants du MKO. Et si le ministère a été informé,
Is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs aware of the funeral of Mr. El Kaim Lavin on April 4 at the Père-Lachaise Cemetery in Paris? As you know,
well, you have been listening to a post-meeting conference between Foreign Secretary Jack Straw from Great Britain and his French counterpart Dominique de Villepin. They've been talking about what's going to happen in a post-Saddam Iraq. Of course, the French very interested in being involved in that in some way, and it looks more and more as if the British and the U.S. have decided that it's going to be run with some UN involvement, but not primarily run by the United Nations. That will be the topic of some conflict. And of course the French want to be involved because they have great interest in Iraq, financial interest in that country, and more than a passing interest in what goes on there. Look, it's time for us to evacuate the place for now and hand it over to Rita Cosby and Greg Jarrett. I'd like to say for my colleague Lori Dew, a pleasant good morning. And guys, I'll hand it over to you now.
All right, Brian, thank you very much. And good morning, everybody. It is 11:30 a.m. in Baghdad, 3:30 a.m. here in New York. And as you heard, I'm Rita Cosby.
We're glad you're watching. I'm Greg Jarrett. This is Fox News continuing coverage of Operation Iraqi Freedom.
And let's go immediately to Steve Harrigan, if we could. He is standing by live in Ruwaysha, Jordan, right on the border with Iraq. Steve.
Rita, there are reports of sporadic gunfire inside of Baghdad, but more and more signs that coalition forces have taken much more control over that city. At this point, at least 6 Iraqi ministries are in coalition hands, as well as an airport inside of Baghdad, the parliament building. This as U.S. forces continue to tighten the grip on Baghdad after 4 days in. Now, there have been signs of some trouble as well. There was candlelight vigil held out by journalists overnight. 3 journalists were killed yesterday. 2 of them were cameramen inside the Palestine Hotel. Those cameramen were killed when a U.S. tank shell hit the Palestine Hotel. U.S. military officials have stressed that they came under fire first, that they were returning fire at the Palestine Hotel. And finally, one scene that is being reenacted in towns and cities across Iraq, that is the destruction of the all-present image of Saddam Hussein. Now, this is the Royal Irish Regiment in the town of Al-Qurna. They knocked down a statue of Saddam Hussein after a little bit of effort, and after that some civilians joined in. Once Saddam was on the ground, they were jumping and kicking on that statue. Rita and Greg, back to you.
And Steve, any word, so what's the sense there about Saddam Hussein? Because the big buzz, of course, on the United States is he alive or dead? Is that the talk there?
It is the talk. There was that giant explosion, of course, yesterday when four of those missiles hit the restaurant where he was believed to have been located, creating a tremendous amount of rubble. But the latest is that British intelligence reports are saying that they don't believe they killed Saddam Hussein in that raid. So it's still uncertain at this point, but people here wondering whether he's dead or alive. People here also seeing the war really take a turn now towards coalition forces. That bubble of almost enthusiasm at Iraqi resistance has burst now a couple of days ago. Rita?
All right, Steve Harrigan, thank you very much for reporting live there on the Jordanian-Iraqi border. Thank you. Well, Monday saw lots of major battles around Baghdad. It's been much calmer in the past 24 hours, but there have been some explosions and also coalition aircraft activity above the city. Joining us from our Washington War Room is Fox News military analyst, Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis. Good to see you this morning, Colonel.
Good seeing you, Rita.
Give us a sense of sort of where our troop movements. I mean, it has been interesting. You know, last night when Greg and I were here, it was frenetic pace. Today it seems a little bit slower, but we're wondering what's been going on behind the scenes.
Well, behind the scenes, we'll go to the screenwriter for a second, and I'll kind of lay some things out for you. You know, clearly, we still have the Baghdad International Airport. We have a very thin line, the 75 miles that are around this entire city, and we have a couple divisions up there, so we're very thinly disposed in the south as well. We have the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force. The Marines have taken the Rashid Airport. They are now moving into the city by foot, as you've heard from one of our embedded reporters. Of course, we already have a good part of the center section here across the Tigris from the Palestine Hotel. You've heard about the palace, certainly the palace grounds, and of course the Mansour area where we dropped those 4 bombs yesterday. We have essentially a light cordon that's taking place throughout the entire area. Essentially what that means, Rita, is that we are trying to allow the civilians to go out, allow humanitarian aid to go in, trying to sort out the bad guys, Special Republican Guards, the Fedayeen, the Al-Qud, maybe some of the Republican Guards that may be in there. Now, the intelligence that we're trying to gather by our people on the ground, basically, we're trying to get the POWs and extract as much information about command and leadership that still may be there. We're trying to excavate, basically find out where all those tunnels are and perhaps where escape routes might be out of the city. There are likely all sorts of tunnels, subway systems, and so forth that people can still flood out that we haven't blocked. We've got the stuff on the surface blocked, but we don't have some other things. Sensitive site exploitation we're obviously doing. We've got our soldiers really focused on finding documents and, of course, caches of weapons and caches of weapons of mass destruction, especially, that we'd like to find out more. So we have the 3rd Infantry in the west, the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force in the east. We have 101st in the north. The 4th MEC soon will release brigade packages out of Kuwait. They should be traveling north as soon as those packages are ready. They've really accelerated the pace of offloading those 36 ships. Thousands of the troops out of Fort Hood are on the ground, really ready to move forward. If you have a moment, either now or later, I'd like to kind of discuss what's going on in the north, because I think there's some interesting things up there, Rita.
And in fact, that's one of the things that we were both just talking about is Tikrit. A lot of people are wondering, you know, we've infiltrated into Baghdad, obviously still sporadic fighting, but Tikrit is his home, you know, this is Saddam's hometown.
You're right. And interestingly, on the screenwriter here, I'll just draw very quickly what's called the green line. Above there are friendlies, below there are unfriendlies. Here in Mosul and then Kirkuk, and then of course you have Tikrit down here, Saddam Hussein's old home. In Mosul, you still have a corps headquarters with a couple divisions. Interestingly, in Kirkuk, you have 6 divisions, 75,000 regular troops. In Tikrit, we really don't have a lot of forces. We have the remaining Republican Guard that's not too far away. But the reality is there's not a lot of activity except for bombing. Now, we do have certainly some of the Kurds that have been they've been fighting against some of the forces in Mosul. And Mosul's in a fairly precarious situation. They've transferred a lot of the forces further toward Kirkuk. Now, if you already know, we have the 173rd, the 1st to 63rd Armor, we have the 10th Infantry. All these forces, though rather light, they're up in this region. And of course we have, as you may well know, the Turks have fortified the border with a buffer zone, but they also have tanks and artillery and other things in the event that the Kurds politically go into Mosul, or rather Kirkuk, which is a very, very ticklish situation because of the Turkmen there, and they have ethnic relationship there.
Colonel, this is Greg Jarrett. Quick question for you. We now know that Tommy Franks himself has personally written letters to top Iraqi generals. They've been emailed and faxed to the generals' locations in Baghdad, personally appealing them to give up, to stop fighting. You can be you can either be captured or dead, or you could be a part of Iraq's future. How successful might that be?
Well, it will only be successful if Saddam Hussein is perceived to be completely out of the picture there, Greg. We've been doing this for a long time, communicating via email or directly through other personnel, I mean, for over a year with some of these leaders, to include some of those in the ministries.
Days, you know, given the pounding in Baghdad, and these generals are feeling it personally, and they're seeing it, and, you know, they're getting a case of the for reals now. And they know it's their lives personally on the lines, and so the general's sort of extending an olive branch. A personal appeal like that, when they're under the gun literally, sounds to a logical person to be fairly attractive, but these people may not be logical.
Well, no, I think they are logical, Greg. The reality is that as long as Saddam has a gun to their head, and if Saddam's in the question, in the picture, that they probably will not capitulate. But you're right. They're going to capitulate because they're concerned about their own welfare and that of their family. The gun is often at the head of their family and not at their head. And that's why if Saddam's out of the picture, then they probably will have the freedom to do what you're articulating.
All right, Colonel, thanks very much. We appreciate your thoughts. We're going to be getting more of them in the next hour or so. Marines seized a military airport in Baghdad. They captured enough ammunition, we understand, for an estimated 3,000 troops there, and they also took a prison. Let's talk about the latest military action now. Joining us from Washington Bureau is Colonel John Garrett. And here with me in the studio, once again, Colonel Richard Issa. Both are former Marines. Thank you both for being with us.
Good morning.
Colonel Issa, let me begin with you. We were talking off camera as we watched the news conference with Jack Straw. That there has been a bit of a lull in the last 24 hours. How do you interpret that? What's your read?
Well, my read is we are into those areas of Baghdad where we can actually begin to clear the streets and so forth. My gut feeling is if we hold where we are right now, hopefully General Frank's plea to the leadership of the Iraqi army, you know, will bear fruit. I agree with the colonel, however, if Saddam Hussein and his sons are still alive, the chances of that happening are kind of slim because he does shoot the messenger all the time. But if they don't listen to General Franks, it appears to me like it's time to push the 4th Mechanized Division or parts of it, brigades of it, you know, through the 3rd Infantry Division and move on up towards Tikrit. Because I believe in my heart of hearts that once you take Tikrit, this war will be over.
Colonel Garrett, do you think that Tikrit is sort of the final battleground and where the 4th ID should go?
Well, it could very well be. There are a couple of possibilities. You know, we really haven't had fix or uncovering the special Republican guards yet in the city of Baghdad. I think we still have to keep some concern held aside for that. And then to the north, the Nebuchadnezzar and also elements of the Al-Nida division have not been uncovered, identified. Certainly that will have to be dealt with. So I would have to say, yeah, those promise to be probably among the last of the real battles.
Colonel Garrett, one of our guys, Rick Leventhal, one of our reporters who's embedded with the Marines, we saw some incredible pictures of him earlier, and hopefully we'll get him up in the next hour or so, of him literally, I mean, he's going through the streets. He's been on the phone with us as he's walking through the streets with the Marines. This is a pretty brave endeavor. His job is to sort of lure the snipers out.
Well, it's one day at a time, and you can rest assured that they're being very careful before they expose themselves. But the thing that it indicates is that the area is secure, and anybody who's watching, anybody who's seeing, whether it's Iraqi population, people around the world, or some of the leadership that we've been discussing, that's really solid, good evidence and information for the people that maybe they should really think about their next move, and regardless of their current position, come over to supporting the new day that's upon them.
And speaking of a new day, there's a bulletin that just crossed that jubilant crowds are cheering U.S. Marines in East Central Baghdad. That may be with our Rick Leventhal, so that's good news.
One of the other things that we have been talking about is just how organized the resistance is. We're now 3 weeks into this campaign, and Colonel Esau, CENTCOM repeated once again today that they are not organized.
Yeah.
What does that mean, really?
Well, that means they've lost their command and control, all right? And as a result, these people are acting independently at the present time. So you have little groups of them in different places around Baghdad, and the name of the game is to ferret them out and to neutralize them.
Isn't it important to get the word out, though, to the Baghdad residents? And this latest bulletin indicates some of the word's getting out, but not to everybody in Baghdad, that coalition forces are here, and that Saddam is gone, and you know, side with us now. How do we get that information out? Do we drop leaflets? Do we intercept with radio transmissions, take over their state-run controlled television?
Yeah. Well, I think we've dropped a considerable number of leaflets, as you know, over the weeks. But right now, you have a Fox reporter, you know, moving with Marines on the ground, you know, into areas that we hadn't been in before. And they're backed up by mechanized forces, but they're on the ground, clearing an area the way you normally do in the combat and the build-up area. And it would appear to me is the more people we have doing that, the more the Iraqis will understand that, well, the Marines and the Allied forces have really taken over, and it's time for us to come out of hiding.
Colonel Jarrett, walk us through sort of how you go through the process. I think it's pretty incredible, as we were seeing our Rick Leventhal talking about going literally through the streets. He was saying about 10 feet away from the sidewalk. I mean, this is very treacherous territory, not knowing really who's friend or foe.
The first imperative is to isolate the area that you're in to make sure that you don't have unexpected reinforcements or surprises. We've pretty well got a handle on that around the city, and certainly into the concentrated areas we're going into. In addition to that, and equally important, is the eyes on target, the reconnaissance and surveillance that tells you sort of what the situation is, down to a very small margin of error, so that you don't just go walking into a street or stumbling into a situation, figuratively speaking, without having a pretty good idea what's there. It becomes a little more risky, I think, in this situation, too, because it is important to go in there during the daylight. It is important for many reasons that we've just discussed, to be seen, to show the flag, if you will. So whereas sometimes you might go at night, which affords you a little bit more protection and ease of movement, it's important to go in the day. So you pretty much have an idea what to expect before you go in there.
And in fact, it's daylight. We're looking at a picture on the other side of the screen, daylight in Baghdad, so you bring up a good point. And we haven't heard from Rick in a while, so they're probably on the move.
I want to show both of you, before we go to commercial break, a piece of videotape that struck us as truly astounding. And as we take a look at this, I'll sort of describe it to you. This is a place called, a forbidden place, called the White Lion. Iraqi showed journalists this stone jail. This is where Saddam's secret police tortured inmates with beatings, with mutilations, electric shock, chemical baths. Now, what you saw there a moment ago was one of the former Iraqi prisoners who managed to get out of there with his life. reenacting essentially for journalists what happened to him. And those are just some of the methods that were used. Again, electric shock, chemical baths, mutilations, dismemberments. I mean, the list goes on and on. As more of this kind of evidence emerges, Colonel Garrett, what effect will that have on world opinion?
Well, I think that it's helpful and has to be that we get the truth out in total about the regime. The more that we see, the more that underlines the nature of the regime. It adds to the things that we've talked about that are so important, weapons of mass destruction, the way they act, the way they treat people. I think it's going to take a while before the people of Iraq are fully educated as to what has been going on. So I think each of these things that are uncovered, each of these points about this regime, it's important that people see, as objectionable as they may be, the truth as to what's been going on over there.
And Colonel Esau, how critical do you think it is to see these type of examples? I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
No, I agree wholeheartedly with the Colonel. The one thing we want to make sure of is that this gets out to all of the Arab television stations, that the people over there see what's going on. Our people back here have already made up their mind that this is a terribly bad person, and he doesn't need to be around much longer. And if the Iraqis feel the same way, and the rest of the Arab world begins to understand what a terrible person he is, I think we'll do just fine.
All right, Colonel Esau, thank you very much. Well, coming up, still no definitive word on whether Saddam is dead or alive. We'll be talking about that. But one British paper thinks that the butcher of Baghdad survived yesterday's U.S. bomb attack. In fact, two British papers are reporting that this morning. That is straight ahead here on the network that America trusts for fair and balanced news. The Fox News Channel will also talk to all of our reporters who are out in the field that we can talk to. Hopefully Rick Leventhal, Greg Kelly. We'll also go to the Pentagon for the very latest details. Stay tuned. We'll have a lot more coming up right after this short break.
Real journalism, fair and balanced. Fox News Channel.
Are you one of the millions suffering from an illness that persists despite modern medicine? Then return to nature. Juice from the Noa Noa fruit is a relatively unknown treatment in today's society. Used by the Polynesian islanders for centuries, its curative properties is nothing short of a miracle. Relief from arthritis to diabetes to depression. Noni juice even promotes weight loss. Call today. What are you waiting for? Relief is just a call away.
During cancer treatment, Elizabeth could only watch from the sidelines. Today, her cancer is in remission, and she's ready to play.
Elizabeth is one of millions of children with hope because of Children's Miracle Network. We are the alliance of premier children's hospitals dedicated to serving all children. Your support can make miracles happen.
10 minutes for this exclusive TV offer, and you get a free bonus CD, King Country.
I just don't think he'd understand.
It's today's best country hits, recorded Elvis style.
Texas, live in Texas, and I swear, like a shadow that's by your side.
That's 3 CDs for just $19.95.
Places where the whiskey drowns and the beer chases my blues.
Every Elvis fan will want this.
Satisfaction is guaranteed. But wait, there's more. Call now for your free Elvis video. It features never-before-seen home movie footage of Elvis. But you must call now. Call now for this limited-time offer and get your free bonus CD. You get all 3 CDs and the Elvis video for just $19.95. Call 1-800-ELVIS NOW. That's 1-800-ELVIS NOW. Do it now.
Hey, baby. I'm okay. I miss you a lot. Take care of yourself, and I'll be home soon.
I hear a lot of talk here about how, we're going to impose this leader or that leader. Forget it. From day one, we have said the Iraqi people are capable of running their own country. That's what we believe. The position of the United States of America is The Iraqis are plenty capable of running Iraq. And that's precisely what is going to happen.
And of course, there's been a lot of talk of what happens before that takes place. Let's go first, though, to the Pentagon and also to Kelly Wright. He is standing by live for the latest developments there. Good morning, Kelly.
Good morning, Rita. One of the questions that still is dogging everyone today is Saddam Hussein alive or is he dead? Now, President Bush says he doesn't know. Defense officials at the Pentagon say they don't know, but they also say it doesn't matter because the Iraqi regime is crumbling, and President Bush says Saddam Hussein is, in fact, losing control of his grip on the Iraqi regime as well as the Iraqi people. In fact, President Bush has gone so far as to say that in days, the Iraqi regime could finally end. Still, defense officials want to know if Saddam Hussein, his two sons, and suspected Iraqi regime leaders are among the dead in this 60-foot crater of rubble created by 4 2,000-pound precision bombs. An Allied B-1 bomber dropped the bombs on the building after credible human intelligence reports indicated that Saddam Hussein was there. But 2 British newspapers are reporting that Saddam Hussein and his sons Uday and Qusay survived the attack Monday afternoon. British intelligence sources reportedly say Saddam had been in the building earlier, but left minutes before the bombs hit. Meantime, defense officials at the Pentagon say it's too early to determine if Saddam escaped that blast.
What we have for battle damage assessment right now is essentially a hole in the ground, a site of destruction where we wanted it to be, where we believed high-value targets were, where intelligence led us to believe that. We do not have hard battle damage assessment on exactly what individual or individuals were on site.
Beyond the site, to the north and west of Baghdad, Allied forces are shifting their bombing campaign to northern cities while still focusing on close urban air support in and around Baghdad. The air campaign focusing the Air Force rather says tonight that coalition aircraft conducted a bombing campaign in Mosul, Kirkuk, and Saddam's hometown of Tikrit. They're trying to degrade Iraqi defenses before coalition ground forces move in. And as coalition ground forces move through the heart of Baghdad, the area has become increasingly dangerous for everyone, including journalists. At the Palestine Hotel, 2 TV cameramen from the Ukraine and Spain were killed and 3 others wounded. CENTCOM says U.S. troops observed snipers firing from the hotel when they gave return fire. A Jordanian journalist working for Al Jazeera was killed when the network's Baghdad office was hit during an airstrike.
War zone is a dangerous place. Baghdad in particular, we believe, would be a dangerous place. We continue to warn people, we continue to warn news organizations about the dangers. We've had conversations over the last couple of days. News organizations eager to get their people unilaterally into Baghdad, and we are saying it is not a safe place, you should not be there.
There is still a presence of Iraqi resistance in Baghdad, one of the reasons why it is still a dangerous place. U.S. forces hit the planning ministry and other government offices in downtown Baghdad, as well as a prison southeast of town where American uniforms were found. Defense officials say the Marines are now in control of the Rashid airport. And defense officials also say one of the reasons why they hit that prison is because of credible intelligence resources coming in stating that there may have been some American POWs at that prison. Tonight, defense officials say the U.S. forces in that area are still conducting a search for 7 American POWs. Rita?
And Kelly, I understand also further detail on the Rashid prison there that they found 2 name tags which that were tying it to at least 2 of the POWs.
Yeah, we don't want to give those names, and in fact, CENTCOM is not releasing those names right now, but we must say that those 2 uniforms that were found were also, they also had blood stains on them, which is a more ominous threat of what possibly took place there.
No, it certainly is. Real quickly on the Saddam issue, what's been reported and what I'm hearing too is that they're not getting any chatter. Usually after something like this happens, they're getting chatter either indicating he's dead or chatter indicating that he's giving some command structures. They're not hearing either. Is there some way to interpret it could go either way?
Yeah, Rita, that's a very good observation, and from your sources as well as sources here at the Defense Department, the Pentagon, you know, the chatter is very important because electronic surveillance has been able to reveal possibly where Saddam Hussein is. The chatter has also revealed some very reliable intelligence about his existence, if he's alive or if he's dead. Right now, none of that is coming across. So it